Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will start the session, The Future of Coding Education, by Mr. Jeremy Rossmann, the founder of Make School. The demand of engineers rises every year. In the United States alone, the government estimates there will be 1 million unfilled programming jobs. As an increasing number of industries and revolutionized and transformed by technology, our educational system has to evolve to meet the demands of our new economy. Jeremy will share the lessons learned from starting a school in the heart of the Silicon Valley, building a curriculum that meets employers' needs, and will discuss trends he's observed as an ever-increasing share of the public turn their attention towards programming education. So please welcome Mr. Jeremy Rossmann.
Thank you. It is exactly 12 hours ago that I landed at Haneda Airport. This is the shortest gap between getting out of the plane to giving a talk in my life, so I hope you will forgive me if I slip, as it's still a little bit, jet lag and whatnot is still in my head. I'm so glad to be here and very excited to share my perspectives on programming education and coding education, especially to give you a sense of what is happening right now in the Silicon Valley, and I think a lot of the parallels with and similarities with what is happening here in Japan. So to introduce myself and my company first, so you understand where my perspective comes from, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Make School. This is kind of a funny photo. It's all my students this year. You can tell that we're programmers and not models. The sun is in our eyes. Everyone's like kind of looking. But this is the current class of one of Make School's programs. And it's located in San Francisco, California. You can see the Golden Gate Bridge behind us. We run actually two different kinds of programs, and we've been around since 2012. We have a 2-month program that is offered in the San Francisco area and in New York City. And that program is just offered in the summer. And we've had 210 students in that program this most recent summer, so summer 2015. And these students came from 210 countries. We had 3 students from Egypt, where our wonderful moderator is from. We had 9 students come from Japan, among many, many other nationalities represented. And then the photo you saw in the very first slide was of our 30 students who are in a program that is a 2-year replacement for the university. And that one is a little bit more ambitious and radical because the students who have chosen to participate in Make School's 2-year program are deciding to study with us instead of going to university, which is very scary for the parents. Parents, of course, they want their children to go to university to get a diploma. At Make School, we don't get you a diploma, but we do get you a job. And I'll tell you a bit more about how that all works. So to understand our connection to Japan, and one of the reasons why I'm here, Make School is actually largely funded by Japanese investors. So we are the fastest growing provider of tech education in the Silicon Valley for high school and university students, and funded by Japan, which is very cool, I think. Amongst our large investors are East Ventures, GREE, the game company you all know, and Archetype Ventures. And we have a corporate partnership with GREE where we collaborated on a curriculum for a summer program, and they sent 8 students to study with us in the Silicon Valley. And Fujitsu actually paid for one of their engineers to come study with us as well. So this was a curriculum that helped employees that were already working at these companies get some extra skills they needed to improve their performance at the job or be able to take a new job inside the organization. So for example, a lot of the students that came from GREE were web programmers, and we turned them into native mobile programmers, and then when they got back to Japan, they're now working as native mobile developers at GREE. So we also have 1 Japanese student in our 2-year program out of the 30 who's come all the way from Japan to try a 2-year alternative to the university offered in the Silicon Valley. So we have lots of connections with Japan, and I think these connections are going to continue growing. So this is the short background on what we do, and I'll tell you how I got started, the very, very short version of the story. I was a student at MIT, and MIT is supposed to be one of the best universities in the world for computer science. I wanted to work in tech. I wanted to be a software engineer maybe even a founder of a startup someday. And while I was at MIT, I discovered that the curriculum at MIT was not designed for me. It was not designed for a job in tech. It was designed for a future in research. And I wanted to be at a startup in the Silicon Valley, not in a lab at MIT. And so the moment that changed my life was when I launched my first iPhone game. And all of a sudden, I had a real product that I learned real skills to build with real users who every day would email me asking for new features in this product. And instead of going to class, instead of doing homework, instead of preparing for my tests, I would instead work with a team of my friends on this app, try to make a sequel to the app. And it started taking so much of my attention, I realized that there was a missed opportunity in coding education. Coding education today cannot be just a copy of how we teach students other subjects. Because of how important it is to teach students how to build products, coding education needs to be project-based. It needs to be customized for the student. And to understand what is powering that different need, why you need to treat coding education as different from maybe chemistry or history or literature, I want to give you some sense of where the software industry is going in the Silicon Valley. So, the power of software. And I think if I tell you all the problems and all the trends, then actually the solutions will seem very obvious to you. You'll be like, oh, of course, this is the right way to do it. So here's some of the trends that we're seeing. Even though most of the media in the United States, and maybe also in Japan, is focusing on programming education, coding, as the power to make Facebook, Google, maybe Line, games from Greed, DNA. Actually, programming is a lot more. Coding is much more powerful than just that. And it is revolutionizing a whole number of industries so that every day, people who know how to program become more and more powerful because knowing how to program provides them with more and more tools that they can use in whatever industry they're in. So to give you an example, friends of mine run a company called PlanGrid. PlanGrid allows teams to manage construction projects on an iPad. Now, nobody would think, oh, I want to be a programmer so I can revolutionize construction. But it turns out that they are making tens of millions, soon hundreds of millions of dollars in the construction industry. They're very, very competitive. And in fact, most of the new buildings in San Francisco right now that I walk by are their customers. So if you go to San Francisco, in your first 20 minutes walking on the streets, you will pass a building that was built by a team that was using PlanGrid. So the impact is very, very real. Another example would be FarmLogs. FarmLogs is building software that allows farms to keep track of everything they've planted, the water they're using, the fertilizer they're using, keep track of how each of their crops are doing, get live updates. It gives them as much information about their real farm as those of us who play some social games maybe have of our virtual farm. So the real farm dashboard. They are even more interesting in some ways because in the United States now, 1 out of every 3 farms is their customer. And more than half of all food that is farmed in the United States is being managed by a farm that is a customer of FarmLogs. So if you go to the United States, the first thing you eat, the food is probably from a farm that is a customer of FarmLogs. PlanGrid and FarmLogs started at the same time as Make School. We actually have the same early investors, a firm called Y Combinator. They're early stage investment firm and accelerator in the Silicon Valley. And so it gives you a sense of the power of software to revolutionize industries beyond social and beyond gaming. That a piece of software that has only existed since 2012 can already be helping more than half of every farmed acre in the United States, most of the new buildings in San Francisco to be built, created. And so these companies are creating a tremendous amount of value for our economy, and they're only two of many, many, many examples of ways that software engineering, programming, coding is being used to revolutionize a whole wide variety of industries. Let's look at a couple more. Transcriptic is a robotic biology lab in the cloud. What this means is there is a biology lab that is owned by Transcriptic with robots that can do experiments. And you, in front of your computer, can program the robots. So before Transcriptic existed, so last year, if you wanted to be a biologist, you would need a biology lab. That costs millions of US dollars. We don't all have in our house a biology lab, but we all have a computer. Now with Transcriptic, computers, programming, coding allow each and every one of us to innovate in biology. And so if you have an idea that you would want to test, a new product you would want to launch that requires a biology lab to create, you now have access to one. This is part of a larger trend. The number of services being made available to programmers that allows them to work faster and that allows them to work in industries that used to be very expensive to operate in is always increasing. If we think about 10 years ago, there was no app store. So if I wanted to get an app in each of your pockets, I would need to pay for a huge number of machines to run my app so that if you wanted to access it, you could access the machines and get the information. Now, I send one file to Apple, and Apple can distribute it to every phone. I send one file to Google, Google can distribute it to every phone. 10 years ago, if I wanted an application in every pocket, I would need to spend millions of dollars before I could start just to get all the machines I needed to run it. Today, I can do it on one laptop with no budget, and it can be in everyone's pocket. Transcriptic brings that to biology. I have friends doing the same thing for robotics. So having robots that are shared, you can program the robots, and they have cameras that allow you to see the result of what you've programmed. And so now, if you know how to code, you have the power of transforming a variety of industries, of doing biology, of doing robotics, and who knows what else is really going to become available. Every month, new ideas in the Silicon Valley make each programmer more and more powerful. There's many more examples. Lyft and Uber are revolutionizing transportation. Smart News, New York Times revolutionizing news. Many people don't know, but the New York Times actually has a huge software engineering team. They hire one of the most largest hires of new programmers in the United States is the New York Times. And more they are creating interactive news pieces, mobile applications, and are doing a lot of interesting things to change the way that news is presented. Instacart, it seems like a simple example, but it's grocery delivery. I think you have it in Japan, a similar thing as well. You go in the app, you choose what you want to buy, fruits, vegetables, bread, and then it comes to your house. So all of a sudden, they're revolutionizing all stores. I have many friends who have not been to a store to buy food in 2 or 3 years because they only use Instacart. Airbnb is revolutionizing the way that we stay places. It's competing with hotels. Between is even revolutionizing the way that we have relationships with other people. It's a mobile application popular in Japan and Korea for couples, right? So the ways that you can impact the world with programming are huge. The powers available to you increase every month. And what that means is there is no industry that is safe. If you think of an industry, you think, oh, well, this will never be changed by programming, you're wrong. Someone in the Silicon Valley is trying to improve, replace, revolutionize every industry you can think of: food, software, construction, social, relationships, dating, transportation, everything, robotics, biology, it doesn't matter. Someone is trying to improve it, and because they have the power of programming, they will be able to. As every day that goes by, that power becomes more powerful. The top venture capitalist in the Silicon Valley, who runs a firm called Andreessen Horowitz, his name is Mark Andreessen, has a famous quote that a lot of people in Silicon Valley have started repeating: software is eating the world. He believes that half of the future jobs, 10 and some years down the line, will be created by or require coding skills. He thinks that the world is going to change that fast. And as a result of this trend, the tech sector in the United States is growing very, very fast. There's so many jobs for coders because if you want to be a coder and work in fashion, there's 5 companies who are hiring coders to change fashion. You want to be a coder and work in farming, there's 5 companies hiring coders for farming. You want to work in social and games, of course, there's many people hiring coders. And so the US government actually has been estimating that there's going to be 1 million empty jobs 5 years from now. 1 million just in the United States. Here's some more problems. Computer science students in university in the United States have doubled in the last 5 years. But even crazier, the number of students studying computer science in alternative programs, like Make School, has doubled in the last year. Today, the number of students in alternative computer science or coding programs in the United States is as many as 1/3 of all of the students studying computer science in university. And 2 years ago, there was basically 0. It's an industry, alternative programming education, alternative coding education, schools like Make School and others, that has gone from 0 to 20,000 students in 2 to 3 years. That shows you just how much demand there is from students to study computer science in the United States. It's crazy. There's also a massive problem in the United States with the cost of education. In the United States, 1 year of university can cost $50,000 US. So if you want to complete a bachelor's diploma, that's $200,000 US. And I've put the number in Japanese yen of the total debt that is held by all students in the United States. It's a huge number, and it's causing many, many social problems for us. More than 10% of students in the United States who have debt from university are unable to pay back and are late on their payments. Many more have their lives really, really compromised by the payments they have to make. In fact, my generation is buying cars, homes, and having kids later because they have to pay so much of their salary back to pay for their education, which in my generation has been less useful in getting students a job than in the last generation. And you have to understand this. I created Make School in large part because I am from the affected generation. I am 24 years old. I am of the first generation that had the App Store in high school. I was one of the first teenagers in the world, along with my co-founder, to realize that people like us, young students, 16, 17, when we were just starting programming, could launch apps on the App Store. I'm the first generation to realize that I can get an app in everyone's pocket, and I don't need to spend millions of dollars to do it. It can just be my side project. And I'm one of the first to realize that the current system is not designed for people like me. And it turns out it's good for Make School. There's many people like me now, so I can have many students. Critically, universities have never tried to and don't even pretend to be designed to prepare students for jobs in tech. Universities say we are a research university. In Japan, it's quite similar. Most universities are on the research university model. This means that the funding comes when you do great research. The professors are hired when they do great research. And the reward as a student is when you do things that make it look like one day you could do good research. But the students who are trying to study computer science in the United States are not going to do research, the new students, right? Maybe 5 years ago, some of them wanted to do research, but all the new students, tens of thousands in these alternative schools, and the number that has doubled to our university, somewhere between 60 to 80,000 students this year, they're mostly there because they want to work in tech. And they are paying huge amounts of money, and they're not learning skills that are going to get them a job. And so there is a crisis developing in the US that is very, very scary, to the point that for the first time since I've been alive, presidential candidates have to debate about how they're going to solve the higher education problem, the university problem. This is completely new. When Obama was getting elected, and we had debates on TV Nobody ever asked Obama, how are you going to fix universities? But now, the whole country knows this. And the new candidates have to answer on TV, how are you going to fix universities? So it's not just me saying this. I'm not like someone who is telling you about a secret that only we know in Silicon Valley. Now even the presidential candidates have to start talking about this problem. The problem is even deeper. Universities that try to adapt cannot. MIT did not have a single class to teach students iPhone development. They ended up using my curriculum that we developed at Make School, and they licensed it to use in their first iOS class at MIT. That's crazy. A startup started by a crazy young guy with red hair introduces the first iPhone development class at MIT, at the #1 programming school in the world? That doesn't make sense. There is no system at any top US university to realize whether the curriculum is too old. Let me tell you a story about that. If you were a student in my summer program and you finished the program in August, which is when it ended, middle of August, this year, so 2 months ago, exactly, you would have used a curriculum that worked. Students loved it. It was amazing. If you looked at that same curriculum 2 months later, within 5 minutes, you would run into an instruction that wouldn't work. The technology that we teach in our summer program moves so fast that curriculum that is 2 months old does not work if it is not updated. Because the technologies we're teaching, Apple is changing the way that you develop apps every day. If our curriculum needs to be updated every 2 months, then it will shock you to find out that the last time that MIT updated their computer science curriculum was in 2007. And this gives you an idea of just how big the problem is. So, it's not just in the US. I did a little research about Japan, and here's what I found. A couple small examples. DNA says that only about 10% of the engineers that they interview in the local market in Japan have the skills necessary for the web jobs that they're looking for. So it's not just a crisis in the US, but Japanese tech companies are feeling a similar problem. And even crazier, our wonderful hosts, Rakuten, Melissa in the global recruiting department said in an article that came out in the Wall Street Journal in the United States a few days ago, so this was just this week, they announced that 80% of the new engineers hired at Rakuten are hired outside of Japan. So I told you about a huge crisis in the US. I think it is a crisis that is shared in Japan. In the United States, we have something similar. We're trying to go and hire from India, from China, from other countries because we cannot find enough good software engineers. And like I said, our government estimates 1 million jobs will be empty that companies want to hire for in 5 years. It looks like Japan has the same problem. And so what it really comes down to is that students are going through a system that is broken, this research university system. So I told you MIT revamped their course structure. EECS, this is the MIT newspaper, EECS is Electrical Engineering and Computer Science. So this seems great. They're really excited about making the curriculum more relevant, more modern. They're going to introduce some robotics into the curriculum. It was a very exciting moment. The problem is the date on this article is 2006. They started introducing a change in 2006. They finished it in 2007. But even in 2006, they thought, oh, wow, you're going to have to finish it by 2007? Oh, that's really hard. Changing a curriculum in 1 year, that's hard. How can they stay up to date when they have to change a curriculum every month now? It's not possible. Here's another example. Harvard. This seems like a great story. It seems like a system that is working. This is from last year, much more current. Harvard announced they want to grow their computer science department. A very, very good sign, right? So maybe Jeremy's wrong. Maybe what I'm telling you is not correct. Big universities are changing. So this article is missing one key fact. Ballmer, who is the ex-CEO of Microsoft, gave $60 million to Harvard. And with the $60 million, Harvard is going to hire 12 new professors. That's nothing. The current system is so inefficient that if you put in $60 million to a top American university, all you can do is grow the size of your computer science team by 12 people. If you give me $60 million, I'll build you the biggest university in the world. Make School started with only $4 million spread out over the last 4 years, and we have a team that is practically the same size, right? So this is really scary and crazy, and it tells us that we can't rely on the traditional system. This is not going to get fixed. You put in money, it goes to nothing. We need to do something else, and that's why there's so many alternatives emerging. So let's talk about the future. A really, really big shift in the United States that I think is going to happen in Japan too is that the government is starting to pressure universities to change their strategy from being proud about the students that come in to being proud about the students that leave. Let me explain to you what that means. In the United States, all of our universities are competing every year in global rankings, trying to be the top university in the world. And these rankings usually look at the quality of the students who come in. How good are their scores? How good are their grades? Things like that. It looks at what percentage of the students come through the program with the diploma, but it doesn't look at what happens the moment they leave. So universities are stuck competing in a system that only rewards them for getting good students in, but does not check if they do a good job before the student leaves. It also leads to some crazy effects. For example, because universities compete on how many students they reject, because the rankings reward them, you get a higher ranking if you reject more students, universities will go to schools where they know that no student can get accepted. They will do promotion saying, apply to my university, and then they will reject everyone so that they can say they rejected a higher percentage of the students who wanted to come. This makes no sense. Why should a university spend their budget to go recruit students just to reject them? It's because they compete in the rankings. But here's the thing. The US government has started slowly saying, we will stop giving you government funding, government money, if you don't start looking at how well the students do after they leave. And the most famous schools right now, the government can't touch. But some of the newer schools that have been taking a lot of student money, and then the students have been graduating very unsuccessful, some of these schools are starting to close, which in my opinion is a very good thing. Because finally, the government is not looking at what is coming in, but they're looking at what's coming out, and they're slowly changing the laws to make that the norm. This is the way it should be. If schools have to tell the students before they come in the full truth about how well students do after they leave, this problem should slowly correct itself. Because then schools have to compete on being a good school. And in the US, that might seem like, of course they compete on being good schools, but no, they compete on all these other things. They compete on students they reject, all the things I told you, but they also compete on who has the best football team, who has the best tennis team. They compete on who has the most Nobel Prize winners. That sounds great, right? Oh my gosh, of course a university should have Nobel Prize winners. But some of these Nobel Prize winners can't teach. Maybe I have a Nobel Prize, but when I'm teaching a class, I talk like this because I can't talk to you, and that's very difficult. It doesn't matter if I have a Nobel Prize. You won't learn anything if I talk like this because you can't hear me and I'm so shy. And so universities will say, I have a Nobel Prize winner, and then the students go, we didn't learn anything. What is crazy for you to realize, there is not one person at a university whose job it is to feel pain when a class is bad. So if a class is bad, like the teacher is not doing a good job or is not explaining well, or maybe they're speaking too fast or they're speaking too slow, or the students don't learn, There's nobody at the university whose job it is to say, oh, we have to fix that. They don't worry about that because they have so many other illogical things to worry about. Actually, in the United States, most professors that are prestigious have a guaranteed job for life. They cannot be fired. So even if their classes are not good, the university has no legal authority to tell them to change. Their job is guaranteed for life. And like I was saying, if once schools start competing on the results instead of what comes in, this process will change. I think slowly universities will stop giving jobs for life because they will realize if I give you a job for life and then you teach students not well, then I will lose my government funding, right? Or they'll be much more careful about who they give jobs to life. And most importantly, they will start focusing more on the student experience. I want to get a sense of like, you can raise your hand if you had a class at university that was not good. Very simple, like a class that was not good. Teacher was not good or material, right. How is this culturally acceptable? In the United States, if you spend 30,000 US dollars on a car, and then when you press the pedal, it doesn't go forward, you say this is a scandal. But you spend $50,000 on a year of university, the professors maybe can't even teach the class, and that's normal. Everyone says, yep, that happened to me. It's insane. So the trend in the future, because universities are slowly trying to shift or will be forced to shift, and I think, and my mission is that new schools like Make School will pressure them to shift. Because what I didn't tell you is that I'm already stealing students from the top universities. I have students last year who came from MIT, students this year from Carnegie Mellon, another top university, Columbia University in New York, UCLA. So some students from top universities who could stay in this amazing top-ranked school are choosing to leave, to never get a diploma, to come study at Make School instead. And I think once that starts happening more, universities go, whoa, 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 we have to change. The future is in closer collaboration with industry. When I built my curriculum for my 2-year program, I called and met with CTOs, founders, VPs of engineering, engineers at 10 Silicon Valley tech companies. They all told me I was the first person to ever contact them. I'm in the same area as Stanford. I'm in the same area as UC Berkeley, 2 of the top computer science schools. And even though those 2 schools are so close to all the companies that you know, Facebook, Google, Apple, they've never gone and asked, hey, what should we be teaching? They're too proud. They think they know. I'm young. I think I don't know. And as a result, my curriculum is better. Because I just ask the companies, I say, hey, what should I be teaching? It's not a secret. They tell me. They say, oh, you should teach this technology, this concept. And some people, when they hear me say this, they get very scared. They say, oh no, now students will never learn about philosophy. Now students will never learn about history. They'll never learn about literature because now you're only preparing them for a job and you're ruining the mission of university. And to that I say that you haven't asked companies. If you go and talk to companies in the Silicon Valley, they actually want students to know more than just technology. They want to hire people who understand history, who understand philosophy, who can speak in front of a crowd, who understand economics, who understand design, who understand how to build products. And so actually, if you ask industry, the answers you get are very reasonable. They don't just want people who can program and only program. They want programmers, coders who can do a lot more. And so that's why our curriculum is only 3/4 on technical content. 1/4 is devoted to non-technical content. Everything from speaking to design to politics to ethics to history, because companies tell us it's important and we trust them. So this is going to come directly linked with the tracking of the student results. Because the closer you start talking to industry, the more you create a curriculum that they like, the more they come hire your students, and the more you can focus on bragging and being proud of the results of your program instead of the students that come in. Another trend we're seeing that is really interesting in the Valley is called lifelong learning. And this is the idea that maybe it's okay that university does not teach you everything. Maybe that should be normal. Maybe the world changes so fast that we should take time in our lives to continue studying even after we have a career. And this is taking several different shapes. One is online courses, Udacity, Udemy, Coursera. These are websites that allow each and every one of us to study one topic that interests us, or maybe that is important for our career, whenever we need to, whenever we want to, and to pay a very reasonable fee to do that. That's one thing. Another thing are these boot camps, which the majority of alternative education schools in the Silicon Valley, when I told you there was 20,000 students in alternative schools, the majority are in boot camps. Boot camps, in Japan, you have at least one that I've met called Tech Academy, but these are short programs, 2 to 3 months long, designed to help people transition their skills to be ready for a programming job. And we actually are running something similar in collaboration with GREE, with the curriculum we developed together, where we take people who are already engineers and we train them extra. So these lifelong learning trends are really interesting because you can imagine that as companies realize that technologies move so fast, they will be willing to invest in the progress of their employees, but they don't want their employees to go back somewhere for 2 years necessarily, for 4 years, but they might invest to have an employee go and train somewhere for 2 months, which is exactly what we're seeing a variety of companies doing. The other trend is a reinventing of the university. The craziest thing that, people, when I tell them they don't believe me, is that companies in the Silicon Valley have mostly stopped caring about whether you have a diploma. So if you don't have a university diploma, your parents will tell you you can never get a job. And the Silicon Valley companies will say, can you program? Let's talk. Which is really interesting because there's a generational gap between the reality of industry and the expectations of parents. And for me, it's a challenge every year to say, no, I promise, companies will hire your child if they come study at Make School, because the parents think, if you don't get it, my child doesn't get a diploma, there's no hope. In fact, Facebook and Google have already made offers to my students in this class. So the top tech companies in the world are trying to hire Make School students already. LinkedIn, Lyft, the ride-sharing company, and a bunch of others have even signed recruiting partnerships with us, which is really interesting. To give you a sense of the model that we're trying right now that I think you'll find will get copied. Actually, it already has been copied. So we started it, we were the first ones, and now there's already a clone. The program is 2 years long. That's what our main, our current 30 students are in. 2 years long. They don't pay directly. They only pay a percentage of their salary when they get a job. And that's very important because the students realize we only succeed when they succeed. And psychologically, that's very important. They've been going through so many programs that have been succeeding, high school, university, and more. These programs that exist that have been succeeding without them succeeding, right? MIT will continue existing whether or not I was successful because they have so much money from the government to do research. They have so much money for so many things that they do that are not exactly teaching, that even if they don't do a good job directly at teaching, they will continue existing. But my students know that if they don't get hired, then Make School will go out of business. And they know that that's a very good incentive for me to work very, very hard to make sure I do a good job at educating them, right? And like I was telling you, the curriculum is built with industry. So I gave a talk a year and some ago at TechCrunch Tokyo where I talked about a pilot version of this program. We had a 1-year version with 2 students from Japan, 11 students total. And so the update from that is it went really well. One of them got hired by Snapchat, one of them got hired by Pandora, the rest of them got hired by other smaller tech companies. We now are doing this 2-year program, so we are continuing, and it's so popular that it's been copied actually down the street from us. So basically, like on the other side of the neighborhood we're in San Francisco, there's a school called the Holberton School, which is 2 years long with no upfront tuition and all these very, very similar characteristics. And so my hope is that I'm the one to bring this change into the world. And actually, if Make School is not the one that is most successful, that's okay. Because at least we've started a conversation where established universities are looking and going, hey, you're stealing my students. Other entrepreneurs are looking and going, hey, that's a good business model. I'm going to copy your school. For me, that's very flattering. And where companies are looking and saying, you know what? That makes sense. I want to hire from you. How can I meet your students? And so what drives change in the Valley has always been competition. And I think it's no coincidence that, as I was telling you, that Silicon Valley is competing with traditional farming, with traditional construction, with traditional food industry, that it would also be that the company that is competing with traditional universities is in the Silicon Valley. So this gives you a sense of the problems that we face, the trends of the sector, and some of the solutions that have been emerging. And I think we're just at the beginning. I looked at some trends in the news in the United States. Education has started being talked about just in the last year. In fact, globally, it's become a much more interesting story. We were recently covered by newspapers in India, Denmark, Japan, and the Mercury News, which is the largest newspaper in the Silicon Valley in the United States, just in the past 10 days. So all of a sudden, people are starting to notice this is like a bit of an interesting thing. And investors in the Silicon Valley that invest in education are starting to themselves get more and more funds to invest, which signals to us that investors overall are starting to realize there's a very, very big business opportunity in fixing the broken systems that have created the problems that we're talking about. 80% of hires outside of the country, only 10% of people that we interview have the right skills. And so to close, what I'll say is that I'm very, very hopeful, and that I'm very, very excited to have a relationship with an amazing country that has problems that parallel the one where we are from. And I couldn't be happier that we are able to help our local education system, economy, industry in the Silicon Valley, but also bring our knowledge and provide it to Japanese companies, the Japanese tech ecosystem, as a way of bolstering both together. And so if you're in the audience and you can think of a way that we could help someone or a company you know, be it because you have students who want to take some of our courses in America or online, be it because you work at a company that you think might want to work with us to develop a curriculum together, I would absolutely love to chat. And I think 2-3 years from now, our relationship with Japan will continue to get stronger, and our impact on the global education system and trends in coding education will be quite noticeable, and a lot of models will appear that are similar or derived from the progress that we've made, I hope. With that, I think we have maybe 1 or 2 minutes left, and so I might take a question or two from the crowd, if there are any. No, do we have no more time? 3 minutes, we can do it. Or not. Going once, going twice. Yes?
I wonder how you make sure that your faculty is really, you have a group of faculty that can ensure that you're actually going to make your students successful.
It's super interesting, actually. I had a slide on that, and I figured maybe I didn't have enough time, but I'm so glad you brought it up. That's like the one slide I deleted. Thank you. The question was about faculty. How do we make sure that our faculty are different? So the traditional faculty have been doing research, get their master's, their PhD, and then they get hired to teach, right? Make School faculty, we only hire engineers. So every single instructor at Make School was an engineer before teaching at Make School. And we select people who like teaching, because even in engineering, there's people who like teaching. And we give them opportunities to work with current technologies so that they don't get out of date. Because one of the big problems is that even if we hire someone who's an engineer today, 3 years from now, what they know is going to be all of a sudden out of date. And so it's two parts of that strategy: hiring in engineers and then giving them opportunities to stay up to date with technology. So they might teach for 6 months, and then we give them 3 months to go and develop a new curriculum or update, or maybe even do some work on a project for a company to learn about what's changed, what's new, and then come back and continue teaching. And so far, that model has been successful. Yes?
Companies hiring people with no degrees.
Yes.
So in fact, half of my engineering staff has no degree.
Half of your engineering staff has no degree, so you're ahead of the curve. You know what's going on.
I think you want smart people to work with you.
Exactly.
But do you do the same? Do your teachers have no degree?
It's a mix. The teachers with many years experience, many of them do have degrees because they come from an era, right? We have a good number of younger staff who do not have degrees. So a lot of our a lot of our maybe under 25-year-old staff, and one of our experienced instructors have no diplomas. So we have one instructor who has the exact story, like he's been working in industry for like 20 years, never got his diploma. So we have a mix. And we don't discriminate. If you do have a diploma, that's can be still great, right? But I'd say maybe 1/4 of our team doesn't have a diploma. I think that takes us to the end of our time. Is that right, Mo? Yes? All right. Thank you so much for listening and for having me. And I look forward for the opportunity the rest of the day today to meet with you individually. If you want to talk more, I'll be around and at the event later today as well. So thank you so much for coming, and thanks to Rakuten for hosting.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rossmann, for the wonderful topic. It's really interesting topic and issue for us, and I really enjoyed the session. I'm sure that all of you enjoyed it as well. So we are going to end the session.
Can
Thanks.
you quickly tell us what you do at Rakuten?
I'm working as a database engineer.
So you're an example of them hiring talented people from abroad to
Yes,
fill.
and I'm from Egypt as well. So my major study was accounting, and I'm working as a database engineer. So it's really interesting topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending. Thank you.
Can I disconnect?